Okay. Hey, modern technology.
Apologies, I was just at work and I just completely forgot.
Oh, no, it's okay. Inshallah, no problem. No problem, inshallah. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi. Have anybody got any questions about last session before we begin today's? Okay. Yes, Bilal, ask. Bilal? No, ask now. It'd be good. Alhamdulillah. If you've got a question to ask, Bismillah, go ahead. If you don't, okay, that's fine. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi. I think where we stopped off last week was halfway. Of things that tayammum can be done for. So we covered fear and harm, and then inshallah today we carry on from there, which is no water being there. So Sidi Mayara says that when you are sure that there is no water, then you can do tayammum. So once you've researched that, looked around that there isn't any water. So here we're looking at, three categories. People who think there's no water, people who are in doubt, and the third is people are delusioned. If you leave those aside, Sidi Mayara says that it's an obligation that all of them seek water. If you seek it and you don't find it, then you make tayammum. Seeking water or the requirement for water, there's different according to if you think maybe there isn't water. The word in Arabic is dhan, and dhan and shak. Dhan is usually translated as conjecture, but shak falls in the same category. So Sidi Meyara says that dhan, when you conjecture that there's no water, it's like having doubt, and so someone who doesn't doubt is like someone who's disillusioned. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. The first one is more stronger than the third. Whatever category you fall under, what you've Sharan got to do is look for water, depending on your age, health, and degree of fitness. The requirement is different. So Sidi Mayara says that people are not the same. Some are strong, some are weak, because the weak are not the same as those who are strong. A man is not like a woman, and a youth is not like an old elderly man. So it's wajib upon each one of them that they seek water, as long as this is not difficult upon them. Sidi Meyara quotes Imam Malik radhiyallahu anh that if seeking water becomes a difficulty for these individuals, for people who it's difficult, they will have to seek water for half a mile radius. And then they will do tayammum if they do not find water which is enough to purify themselves. So this category is like, someone who is a patient, someone who is ill, doesn't have the ability. Likewise is the someone who is sick, who doesn't have the ability to use water because he can't go and find it, and because he needs help to make water anyway. I mean, make wudu. He needs help. Likewise is someone who finds water in a well, but there's nothing to draw the water from the well. Like a rope, the bucket is there, but the rope is not there, or the rope is there and the bucket is not there. So all these three categories, they will, if they're fit, is a 1 mile radius. If they're not fit, it's half a mile radius degree of fitness. If they are patient, if they're ill, they're not, under obligation to go and look for water, especially someone who's relying on others to help him to do water. Do wudu. And the water found must be enough to do tayammum. If not, do wudu. Otherwise, they will do tayammum. A majority of the countries in Europe, there isn't a problem with water. You find certain parts of the Muslim world where there is a shortage of water. I remember I was in Kenya about over 10 years ago in Nairobi, and they used to have to, even for Jummah, they would have to buy in water. In those scenarios, again, the scholars will give a different opinion to this, because if the water is, if to buy water is too expensive, example, in the UK, it's very easy to get, a litre of water for £1, or even cheaper than that. So if to get, a bottle of water is about £5, I will be one of those who would say do tayammum instead, because there you're wasting money. Okay. We move on to verse 90. وصلي فردا واحدا أن تصل جنازة وسنة به يحل. The translation is that you can pray with one tayammum Okay, Bilal, where are you? Yes, this is more to do. You'll find they talk more about this, Bilal, regarding Salatul Subh. But the thing is, if there is fear that you will miss the time of the prayer, then tayammum is fine. But it's usually with Salatul Subh rather than others, because people wake up late, or there's danger of waking up late. People will say in Europe, apart from Spain, no one takes a Qailula. So in the Muslim world, that scenario would be there. Verse 90, you can only pray one fard with one tayammum. However, you can join Salatul Janazah to it and the Sunnah prayer to it. So Sidi Meyara's commentary is that this verse deals with the second category, we talked about last week. What you can actually do with tayammum. So here the command is that the tayammum is for a fard prayer only. So with one tayammum, you will only pray one fard prayer. The prayer that is permitted to be joined on it is, Salatul Janaza. And if you pray, a sunnah other than the Salatul Janaza, like witr with the tayammum for Salatul Isha, that will be permitted. But you cannot join a fard to it. It doesn't matter, uh, this is for, the hukm for the patient, the traveler, the one who is resident. Um, uh, Again, this that we do have this dichotomy within the madhab that you can't do if you're fully resident, you can't do tayammum for a nafil. It only has to be for a fard, and as long as the nafil is attached to the fard, it's permitted. Um, I have I have an adage which I'd like to share with you, which highlights this problem. Um, the old adage that Muslim scholarship has is that you don't ask the Iraqis about nabid. The nabid, the drink that would turn uh, it can become alcoholic. Uh, so you don't ask the Iraqis about nabid, and you don't ask the Hijazis about music. So those are the two old adages. My addition to this is you don't ask the Maghribis, the people of the Maghrib, about tayammum, because they will do tayammum for anything. Um, Again, I've grown old with them, so I'm used to it. They, majority of them, the religious people will have a stone on them, and they will take the stone out and do tayammum and carry on. But this is what Sidi Meyara says, that you can't do tayammum on its own unless it's for a nafil, unless it's attached to a fard. Yes, Bilal. There you go. Bilal, yeah, my grandfather was like that. Yeah. What look, at, this is my stone. I have it, where I'm sitting. I have one in the car. Uh, it's just, the influence of these people. It's, I have one in the car. I have one in my bag. Uh, so again, certain things do rub on you, rub off onto you. But uh, I'm reminded of, the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the deen is ease. Um, but again, just to sum up, that you are only allowed the with one tayammum, one fard. If there is a fardul kifaya janaza, then with that with that fard prayer that you've prayed, you can pray Salatul Janaza with it. And if there are any nafil attached or sunnah attached to the prayer, you can pray with those as well. Okay. We move on to verse 91. وَجَازَ لِلنَّفْلِ ابْتِدَاءً وَيَسْتَبِيهِ الْفَرْض لَا جُمَعَ تَحَاضِرٌ صَحِيحٌ. 91. It's permitted to do nafil at the beginning, and it's of a fard. But you can't do tayammum for Juma if you are resident correctly. This is Sidi Mayara says this is the third section. What tayammum is done for and what is not done for. We informed that you can do tayammum for a nafila at the beginning independently. However, if this nafil is with the tayammum for a fard and it follows it. So again, what we just talked about earlier, you can't do it with the intention of just praying a nafil. It has to be for a fard. This, when you're correctly resident, it's permitted for them to do tayammum for a fard prayer, as long as because if you look at it, that Juma is included in the fard. It's not out of the fard category. However, the mashhur opinion of the school is that Juma is not permitted with a tayammum. I'll come to it, the reason why, in a minute, inshallah. As to someone, the category of people who would be permitted to pray nafil absolutely without them being attached to a fard, would be someone who is ill, or someone who is a traveler, because there's a reason for it, because they're on a journey, or they are ill. As to someone who is correctly resident, he will not do tayammum for a nafil, an independent nafil. So it's not joined to a fard or any other prayer. As for Juma, now Juma is, if you're correctly resident, then you need to be free, not be a traveler, and not be ill. So if you fall in those three categories, tayammum would be permitted for you anyway. I remember from the previous classes, because now we have people who have certain kind of illnesses. For instance, someone suffers from what's it called? What's a well-known skin disease? Psoriasis or eczema. So those people, my understanding is that because they fall in the category of marid, of a patient, they would be allowed to, if they're resident. Yeah. Other than that, because a Juma is, you got to be free. Inshallah, when we come to it, you'll understand what we're talking about. You got to be free. You got to be a man, not be a traveler. You got to be resident and not be ill. And there are certain other categories. So inshallah, we'll cover it when we come to that. But the main point from verses 90 and 91, the tayammum must be only for a fard. But if there's nafil attached to it, or fardul kifaya attached to it, or a sunnah attached to it, they will be allowed. But someone who is resident correctly, he will not be allowed to make tayammum just for nafil. That's the well-known opinion of the madhab. And I've already mentioned to you, the practice of people of the Maghrib. They don't need an excuse for it. Okay. We move on to verses 92, 93, and 94. Because most of you have got access to the translation, I'm not going to translate. I'm just going to move on to the commentary to where he explains, the Fara'id of Tayyim. So these are, the Fara'id, the Sunan, and the recommendations of Tayyim, inshallah. Okay. So the Fara'id of Tayammum again are 8. They're more than the Fara'id of Wudu. The first of them is to wipe the face. The second fard is to wipe the hands to the wrist. Ibn Hajib says that, if you've got a ring on, you'll remove it. The other opinion is that, you just turn the ring. The third obligation is the intention, and the second, the place is when whatever you're using, when you first wipe, if you're using a stone or if you are using soil or sand, it's when you will strike or touch, that it should coincide with that. And the intention, and this is where it's really important, what we were talking about before, what you can do and what you can't do with tayammum, is that the intention is always to be permitted, istabaha. When we make wudu, we make the intention raf al hadith, to remove minor impurity. Or when we make the intention to do ghusl, we make it to remove major impurity. But when we make the intention for tayammum, is always istabaha, that you are permitted to pray, and you specify what, if it's minor impurity or major impurity. And here you've got to be specific, because it's your intention that is going to purify you, along with what you're going to do. The fourth obligation is the first strike. And then what's meant by the first strike is putting your hands on, the surface of the earth. The fifth obligation is to do it all in one go, like wudu. Imam Malik in the Mudawwana says that, if there's very a minor gap, it's overlooked. But it has to be all in one go. The sixth obligation is Sa'idun Tahir, pure earth. So there's a difference of opinion. This is what Sidi Meyara says, that, there's a difference of opinion what Sa'id is and what Tayyib is. Because in the ayah, and this is the ayah of Tayammum, Surah Ma'idah, ayat 6. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَتَيَمَّمُوا سَعِيدٌ طَيِّبًا. So do tayammum with Sa'id Tayyib. So here we've got, Sidi Meyara quoting Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi. Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi has a work called Ahkam al-Quran. Just a note from me, if you really want to understand the fiqh just from the Quran, then you should, buy a copy of, of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi's Ahkam al-Quran. Buy a decent print. Um, you'll find that, I think people are trying to translate Imam Qurtubi's Ahkam al-Quran, but that is not Ahkam al-Quran. It's where tafsir and Ahkam are combined. Ahkam al-Quran is where, uh, the scholar will just look at the ayats of Ahkam, where judgments are derived, and uh, there's a difference of opinion if it's 550 or just 500. That's the limit of the ayats from which we derive judgments from. So from 6,666 ayats, there are only 500 or 550 which are used to derive judgments from. So this ayah is one of them. So Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi says that, what supports this and is derived from this is clear linguistically that Sa'id is the surface of the earth. The word Sa'id means the surface of the earth, and whatever is found on it, be it sand, stone, clay, or soil, um, that that's what will that comes under the hukm. So whatever is naturally found on the surface of the earth, not something that you've got to dig, but is simply found on the surface of the earth, as to what tayyib is. The mother of Imam Malik radhiyallahu anh, this is Sidi Meyara, he says what's meant by tayyib is tahir, meaning pure. So we're looking at what is pure, and it's found on the surface of the earth. And Sidi Mayara adds, this is also, the opinion of Sidi Abu Zayd al-Kairwani in his Risala. He says, do tayammum with, Sa'id Tahir, what's found purely on the surface of the earth. As the well-known opinion is that you will not pray until there, sorry, just ignore that, because it does not, it's not relevant to what we're talking about. So just to sum up, the sixth obligation is anything pure found on the surface of the earth. So some people will go to garden centers and buy stones. I'm just going by what I've come across. If it has been processed, you can't do tayammum with it. It has to be in its natural form. So if you're going to use a stone, it has to be a stone, not something that has been processed. Okay. The seventh obligation is that the tayammum and the prayer, there must be a correlation to them. So it's attached to the prayer. This is the next point will clarify this further. Number 8, the eighth obligation is that the time must have begun. So if you do tayammum before the time has begun and then wait till the time for that prayer begins and then stand up to pray, you don't have tayammum. You need to wait till the time has begun, then be ready to pray, do tayammum, and then pray straight away. So you'll find that uh, that the fuqaha have divided the people who will do tayammum into three categories. They will. So the three categories are uh, the first time, the middle time, and the end of time. So by this time, by the way, uh, fiqh-wise, we never go out of ikhtiyari time, because for each prayer there is an ikhtiyari time and a daruri time. So this first time, middle time, and end time is to do with ikhtiyari time. If you find yourself in daruri time, you have no choice but to pray straight away. Inshallah, when we get to the end, when we begin the book of prayer, we'll talk about the times of prayer, inshallah. So you'll find that there are three types of people as well. These three categories is the one who hopes to find water, the one who has given hope, and the one who is in maybe he'll find it and maybe he won't find it. So the one who has given up hope that he will not find water at all, this goes back to what we were talking about, that half a mile radius or a mile radius. So someone who has given up hope, he will do tayammum at the beginning of the time and pray. Someone who maybe he'll find it and not find it. Someone who has travels this takes this journey on a regular basis, so he knows he will find it at a certain place, so he will be allowed to delay to the end of the time. And the one who's in doubt, he will do it in the middle of the time. But you'll find in practical purposes in our lifestyles, you're trying to fit things in with work, study. But again, it's there's a choice that we make ourselves. Do we make life me-centered or God-centered? If it's me-centered, then we're always trying to fit in stuff. If we make it God-centered, it's amazing how much ease comes our way. Okay. So those are, the 8 fara'id of tayammum. Is there any questions on that, or are you clear on this? Yes, Tahmiz.
What was number 7, Sheikh?
Say it again.
What was number 7?
Okay, 7. It needs to be connected to the prayer. Anyone else? Okay. We move on to the Sunan and the yes, Bilal. The connection with the prayer. No, that's more to make sure that the tayammum is connected to the prayer, so you don't do it before time. So whenever you do it, it's not like doing wudu, where you do wudu and then you can do something else and then pray. With tayammum, you make tayammum and you pray straight away. So there must be a correlation to the tayammum and the prayer, and that's where number 8 kicks in, is that the time must have begun, so you can't do it before time. Okay. 95 and 96. So these are the sunan of wudu and the recommendations. So again, I'm not going to translate, I'm just going to move on. The sunan of tayammum are 3. First, you wipe the hands from the from the wrist to the elbows. Because to wipe them from the beginning of your tips of your fingers to the elbow, wrist, that's a fard. The second strike on clean earth, that's to wipe the hands with. That's the second sunnah. The third sunnah is that you give preference to wiping your face over wiping your hands. If you do it the other way around, your prayer will be correct. But God mentions, again, the order. We don't make it an obligation, but you give preference to wiping the face first and then the hands. And Sidi Mayara says, if you do it the other way around, your prayer will be correct. Are we okay on? Because that's the only 3 sunan. So that's clear, straightforward. We move on to the recommendations. Is before you strike the earth, you say the basmala, you say the tasmiyah. The rest is called, the praiseworthy description. I can show it to you better than, I can articulate it. Do you want me to tell you or do you want me to show you? Your choice.
It'd be amazing to see a demonstration. Barakallahu feek.
Okay. So, stone, when you're using the stone, you're actually mimicking if you were taking touching soil. So you just wipe like that. You don't, just once, the inside of your palm and then the other palm, and then your left hand cups the back of your right, just the back. Not if you watch, I don't touch the thumb. So outside, cup the elbow. Now turn your hand inward, inside, and then you rub inside. Then whatever dust or whatever you have on your hands, you wipe it onto the left hand. Now you wipe the inside of the arm and then turn, cupping the outside of the left arm and then wiping it, and then the back of the hands, do khalal, and then wipe the top of the left thumb, and then finish with wiping the right thumb. That's the praiseworthy description. And it's done really quickly. It really flows. Are we okay with this? Yes, Zakaria.
You see how you did the right before the left? Is that only because you had a stone? Let's say you were doing it on the ground. Would you do both hands at the same time for the praiseworthy?
Yes, but both. You would just if you had a boulder on the if there was a stone, you would just wipe your two hands over them.
Yep, amazing. And also one more question.
Yeah.
I've seen people after they wipe their hands on a rock or boulder or the soil or the ground, they hit their hands together. Is that just to take the dust off, or is that part of a sunnah or a mandub or
That's nothing. That's their own practice.
Right.
Because if you are striking a boulder, if there is, you can just shake it very lightly.
Right.
Yeah.
Barakallahu fik.
Are we okay with that? Okay, inshallah. 97 and 98 is what what breaks wudu. I mean, sorry, tayammum. 97, if you find water before you pray. Yeah. If you find water before you pray, and if you find it afterwards, you repeat it within the time if possible. 98, like the one who is afraid to be from being robbed, or someone who hopes that وَزَمَنَ مَنَاوِلًا وَلَا. Let me get the translation right. Okay. Like the person who fears of being robbed or entertains hope, that he might find water, or the person who is physically incapable and who has no one to hand him water. What breaks wudu, from the ahdath and asbab, what we've covered before, also breaks tayammum. The only addition to that is finding water. But this water needs to be found before you begin to pray. So if you find water before you pray, is you've done tayammum and then someone brings water, that will break your tayammum straight away. Yeah. Sidi Mayara quotes Imam Mazari. Imam Mazari is from a family who, I think he's buried in modern day Tunisia, I think. But anyway, I'm not sure of his exact place, but as a scholar, he's an amazing scholar. He's someone who reached the level of ijtihad mutlaq, but he still stayed within the school of Imam Malik. He says that, someone who's done tayammum and then they find water before they pray, it becomes necessary for them to make use of the water because their tayammum is invalidated. The exception being that, if they do occupy themselves with, making wudu, and the time of the prayer will end, then they don't um, don't do wudu. They will just carry on and pray. So Sidi Meyara says, what here it's not necessary for them to make use of the water if the time is tight. And in that scenario, their wudu has not been invalidated. Because, the author has says that they find water before they pray. But if the water is found after they pray, their prayer is correct. But here he says, you repeat it within the time, in yakun, if it is possible. This you'll find, inshallah, as you continue with your studies, this phrase that, you repeat within the time. So repeating within the time, again, is in the ikhtiyari time, not in the dururi time. And they've put this provision there, if possible, in yakun. Yeah, meaning that, if it's possible, and they're looking at the people that, who were hoping to find water, or they were afraid of being robbed, or attacked by wild beasts, those categories. I've come to the end of what Sidi ibn Ashir would and Sidi Meyara say that, is the book of purification. There is nothing in this text that covers wiping hoof and wiping over bandages. Because there isn't, I will quickly go over it. If you end up with a wound that needs a bandage, you will just wipe over the bandage. You will wash the rest of the limb, but not wash that part of it. And doesn't matter where the wound is and where you're looking at, just wipe wet, like you would take water and wipe over your head. It's exactly how that will be wiped. As to hoof, the madhab does not have this opinion, which we find, people I call, the new Hanbalis, who call themselves Salafis or Wahhabis. They will wipe over, thick socks or even normal socks. How we wipe it within the madhab is that we put, we wipe underneath and on top. So your right foot, you would put your left hand at the beginning of your toes and the right hand on top, and then you will pull up to and including, towards the ankles. So you will wipe, and you will repeat that on the left foot, where the right hand will go underneath and the left hand will be on top. So we're unique in the sense that we don't just wipe on top, we wipe underneath and on top. What can be wiped? It's only leather socks. By leather socks, it actually means that it's, has to be leather. This new product that has come out, where they've got, new material which is, waterproof. The position of the school is, it has to be leather. And the leather has to be, you've got to make sure that, it was slaughtered. It was not, not leather where it's doubtful how the animal was slaughtered. Okay. As to how long, the recommendation is that every Friday you take them off. Otherwise, it's up to you. You need to do wudu fully. Once you've done wudu, then you will put the hoofs on, and then you can wipe. If you're out and about and you have boots that come above your ankles, my teacher allowed that, so I don't have a problem with that. So if it has to cover your ankles and above, and as long as the purity of the leather becomes an issue, but otherwise it's not a problem. Okay, as I said, we've come to an end for the book of purity. If anybody has got any questions about purity, wudu, ghusl, tayammum, now's a good time to ask. Bismillah. Okay, no problem. We'll begin then, inshallah, Kitab al-Salat. No, it's something that what happens is a lot. Our fuqaha will take the Shafi opinion for ease for people, because with us it's if the animal has been slaughtered and then it's tanned, then it's halal. If the skin is impure and it has been tanned, then they say you can make use of it, but you can't. You can only make use of it storing dry products. So if it can't be used to store oil or any fluid, because then the impurity will mix. But they take there is opinion within the ashab of Imam Malik, which are similar to Shafi. They take it from there, but Imam Shafi's opinion is the one that permits use of this. Inshallah. Okay. Kitab al-Salat. A question for all of you. Do you know the difference between ikhtiyari and daruri? Time-wise, what the difference between ikhtiyari time? Yes, Bilal. What about the rest of you? Do you know the difference between ikhtiyari and daruri? Brilliant. Have you covered time? Is there, because the text doesn't cover it, if people are okay with time, then I don't need to go through it. Have people covered the times of prayer? Okay. The word ikhtiyari means that you have choice. Yeah, you have choice. So from the beginning of the ikhtiyari time to the end of the ikhtiyari time, you have choice to pray within that time. There's ikhtiyar. The daruri, the daruri is where there's need. You need to pray when you find yourself in that. You won't come across, the wording that the mention of sin that much in this text that we're covering, and others as well. But if you on purpose, without any valid excuse, delay your prayer into the daruri time, that is sin. I mean, that is a sinful act. You need to pray straight away. Okay. The ikhtiyari time of dhuhr is from midday, from when the sun is at its zenith, to one shadow length. So there's always, before midday, there's a slight shadow of the object. So when you are calculating it by shadow, you always exclude that. Yeah. So if you put, a piece of stick in the ground before midday, you'll find that it has a little shadow. And then when it's midday, the shadow will start increasing, and it will increase to the size of that object. That's the end of ikhtiyari of dhuhr. And then the ikhtiyari of asr is from the beginning of the first shadow, a second shadow, to the yellowing of the sun. To the yellowing of the sun. The ikhtiyari of maghrib is from sunset and it lasts for a person to, if they need to do ghusl, wudu, once they've prayed it, that's the end of the ikhtiyari. The ikhtiyari of Isha is from the disappearance of the redness in the sky. It's called Shafaq al-Ahmar. After sunset, there's this red hue that spreads on the horizon. Once that disappears, Isha kicks in. Yeah? And it lasts to the first third of the night. 51. Hold on. Yeah. Yeah. First third of the night. You'll find that, just a side note, the Hanafis and Hanbalis, they wait for, there's a band of white that appears on the horizon after the disappearance of the redness after sunset. We don't wait for it. We just, as soon as there's no redness in the sky, Isha kicks in. Yeah. The ikhtiyari of Subh is from the real dawn to asfar, when you can see clearly people's features. Because the real dawn is pitch dark, and asfar is not sun. The best way to understand it is that when before the sun sets, it goes dark, and before the sun rises, it goes uh, clear. There's light, there's clear light, but the sun hasn't risen yet. That's asfar. But real dawn, there's a false dawn and a real dawn. The false dawn is you see a crack on the horizon appear. It's a band of white, and it doesn't, open. It just appears and it doesn't open. That's the full stone. That's not when sub kicks in. Sub kicks in, it's like, curtain rise. At theatres, the curtain rises. Usually in the text, they say, like the tail of a fox. Right in the middle, it starts, splitting. The band starts splitting, going upwards. That's the real dawn. So from the real dawn till asfar, when things become very clear. The dururi of sub, so this is the dururi times. The dururi of sub is from the asfar, the clear asfar, to sunset. The dururi of dohr is from the end, the beginning of the second shadow to sunset. And the dururi of asr is from the yellowing of the sun to sunset. So Dhuhr and Asr have a joint dururi time, from the yellowing of the sun. The dururi of Maghrib is after they've prayed it and fulfilled their conditions till Fajr. Till Fajr. And the dururi of Isha is from the beginning of the second third of the night to Fajr. So the dururi of Maghrib and Isha is shared between from the beginning of the third the beginning of the second third of the night to Fajr. Two points. One is the Maliki school has a unique position that there's a overlap of 4 rakats of Dhuhr into Asr. So when Dhuhr finishes, if you were to begin praying Dhuhr, and when you finished and you got up and prayed Asr, both prayers would be in Dururi time. Again, this is something that you find that certain scholars within our madhab don't agree with, and the rest of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah don't agree with us anyway on this. But the mashhur of the madhab is that there's a 4 rakat overlap. So when just before the finish of the first shadow, you pray Dhuhr, and when you finish, you get up and pray Asr. Both of them would be in Dururi time. Okay. If you want, to see where the madhab bases their times on, if you go to Sahih Muslim and look at the times of prayer transmitted by Jabir bin Abdullah and Abdullah bin Umar, you will find these times there. But Imam Malik radhiyallahu anh begins his book, the Muwatta, with the times of prayer, and the first hadith that he quotes the first hadith that he quotes is the hadith of Imam of Jibreel, when Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam came and prayed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the Kaaba. I will answer your question in a minute, Sanaullah. you will find that the full. If you want to read the detailed version of this hadith of time of prayer of the Imam of Jibril, you'll find it in the Sunan of Abu Dawood, and it's Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu who's transmitting it. Where if you read it, you'll see where we get the overlap as well in that hadith. Okay, Sanaullah. Asr will be in Durudi time as well, but isn't Ikhtiyari time for Asr. The Ikhtiyari time of Asr, Sanaullah, finishes at the yellowing of the sun. So from the beginning of the first shadow to the yellowing of the sun is the Ikhtiyari of Asr. And from the yellowing of the sun till sunset is the Dururi of Asr. Does that make sense, Sanaullah?
Yeah, I guess I was just asking, like, when you said that you have the 4 rakah time in between, where the special position within the madhab, so where you pray, the Zohar time ended, you prayed 4 rakah Zohar, and then you got up prayed Asr, but Asr would be in the Ikhtiyari time for Asr, right? Not the Daruri time, right? Or
no, both prayers will be in Ikhtiyari time. Both prayers.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, Salatul Dhuhr is in Ikhtiyari time, and Salatul Asr is in Ikhtiyari time. Both of them are in Ikhtiyari time.
Okay, thank you.
And in Northern Europe, especially in the winter, this is a godsend, because after an hour after Dhuhr, Asr kicks in. So it's very useful. Makes life easy. Anybody else on times of prayer? Because I'm done. Oh, yes, Bilal. There is no time for a fard prayer that becomes haram. The only times that are haram are for nafil. And those are when it's haram when the Imam on Friday stands to give the khutbah in Arabic. And if you begin praying and he stands, then you stop. You always, if you need to walk away from the prayer, you always end it with a salam. It's makruh when the Imam walks into the mosque to go to the minbar. That's how modern mosques are built, because the historical old mosques, the chamber or the room for the Imam is always behind the mihrab, and there's a door in the mihrab. He will just walk, open the door, and he comes and sits on the minbar. So it's haram to pray any prayer when the Imam sits and is about to begin. It's makruh when he walks in or is just about to sit. In that scenario, if you've already prayed 1 rakat, then quickly just pray another one with just Fatiha really quickly, if he's not going to begin yet, because they will come and sit and then the adhans will begin. So in that scenario, if you've prayed 1 rakat, then complete it with another. But if the Imam stands, doesn't matter where you are, just end it straight away, because then it's haram. There are certain times that are makruh for nafil prayer. Example, after Salatul Asr till the Jamaat for Maghrib has finished, and then from after Salatul Subh till the time for nafil becomes halal. The time for nafil is after sunrise. The sun must come to your eye level. Once it's at your eye level, after that you can read nafil. So the time for nafil, daytime nafils, from that time till before zawal. So once zawal kicks in, that's the time for Salatul Dhuhr. But for any fard prayer, there is no haram time. Any other questions for the times of prayer? Okay. Okay. So we move on to the Farad of the prayer. Before I begin, we began talking about how physically we cleanse ourselves and purify our bodies, our clothes, and the place that we're going to pray on. And when was the last time anybody went for an interview, a job interview? Anybody want to have a go? No one's gone for a job interview. Okay, for a university interview, college interview. Okay, fair enough. The point I'm trying to make is that the point I'm trying to make is that when we go for some kind of interview or we go to meet certain people we look up to, we physically try to make sure we look our best and we're in the right state of mind. And what we've covered today is, the Aqeeda is to put your mind in the right state of mind. The purification that we've covered is to make sure that you are looking your best. That's the ideal. Now, the prayer is literally you are going to stand in front of your Maker. Yeah? Okay. Verse 99. فرائض الصلاة 16 شروطها 4 مفتقر. That the fara'id of prayer are 16. The conditions are 4, which I needed for the 16. Okay, before Sidi Meyara moves on to the fara'id, he talks about, where the word salat is derived from. The word salat, linguistically, means supplication. It literally means dua. But what has happened is because the word salat now, its association with the deen of Islam, it's taken on a particular meaning. You'll find that Christian Arabs, they will still say, when they make dua, they will say, let's make salat. So when you say that to Muslims, the reaction to that is not to raise your hands and make dua, but the Christian Arabs do that. And that's Qadi Iyad. He says that it's well known in the language of the Arabs. What the Shari, what the lawgiver has done is he's attached, the supplication, what he wanted from words and statements and physical actions. The other opinion is that it's derived from, attaching one thing to another, linking it, binding it between two things, mean that you are being binded and connected or tied, the slave, to his Lord. As to the opinion, how many rakats were made or obligatory, was it 2 rakats or was it 4 rakats? I wouldn't delve too much into that, because if because those narrations that say that 2 rakats were the ones that was made obligatory first, and then 2 were added. You'll find that sound scholarship says that don't pay that much heed to it, because Allah says that when you're on a journey you shorten it to 2, and I think that's enough indication. Okay. The obligation, I mean, the ruling on someone who leaves it on purpose, or accepts it because of it's a azim, I mean, tremendous standing in the Sharia. Inshallah, we'll come into it later on. Sidi Mayara says that the prayer has conditions, obligations, sunan, and recommendations, mustahabat. The difference between a shart, a condition, and an obligation is that the condition is not in the obligation. The condition is outside of the obligation, and the obligation is in the obligation in itself. So you'll find that conditions are of 2 types. There's conditions of obligation, and there are conditions of ada, which is doing that action. So the conditions of obligation for the prayer are 5 in number. You've got to be a Muslim, you must be pubescent, you must be baligh, you must be aqil, you must you shouldn't, someone who is in charge of their intellectual senses, you must be free from bleeding, the monthly cycle, or the post-birth bleeding. The time must have entered. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the 5 obligations. Qadi Iyad has added 1, which is called Bulugh al-Dawa, that the message of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam should have reached them. The author of this work has not included Bulugh al-Dawa. Why? Because this is addressed already, to Muslims. Sidi Meyara says that the Bulugh al-Dawa is dropped because this was written 400 years ago, and he's saying that the whole earth has received the message of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. A lot of us would disagree with that. And Islam is dropped because this is written for Muslims. Just to go back, on if the message has reached them or not. If the pristine message, meaning that what we find in the UK is that, the who we call the Qadianis or Ahmadis, they're very active in making sure that their literature is available in all the libraries of the UK. You can go to, the most obscure places of the UK, and in their library you will find their literature. Just because, their literature has reached, even if someone was to read it and become an Ahmadi, that does not mean that, the message of Islam has reached them. The correct message of Islam needs to reach them. The conditions of, facing the Qibla, being free from khubuth, covering your aura, inshallah, they will come, but again, it's how Sidi Meyara, not Sidi Meyara, Sidi ibn Ashir has arranged the poem. Okay. The 16 Farad of Salat. We'll make a start. This is verses 100 to 104. The first obligation is to say Takbiratul Ihram. So this is the takbir that you open with. It is an obligation upon the Imam, the one praying on their own, and the one praying behind the Imam. The wording has to be Allahu Akbar. No other wording is accepted. No other word is accepted. Unless, someone can't speak. So if someone has this disability, then their intention will be accepted. And there's a unanimity on this. As to someone who is ignorant of Arabic, and this is the position of Imam al-Abhari, who's one of the great Imams from Baghdad. His position is that, someone who is so ignorant, he can't say Allahu Akbar. His intention will, or their intention will suffice. Imam Abul Farj, again, another Baghdadi Imam, they're looking at, so this one where someone can't even say Allahu Akbar, they're looking at people coming into Islam. So we're looking at, people who've just become Muslim and they can't even say Allahu Akbar. Imam Abhari says that their intention will suffice. Abul Faraj, he says that, whatever they entered Islam with, they can begin the prayer with that. So usually people enter Islam with La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. So those are, the two opinions that are very useful for people who are coming into the deen. I personally don't make any difference between, people who have been born into Muslim families, but later on in life come back to the deen. These opinions would apply to them as well. There is an opinion that, a synonym of takbir in, their language would be permitted. Yeah. Again, this is not, again, we're looking at people who have come into the deen. However, there is no difference of opinion that, recitation of the Quran cannot be replaced in any other language. So when should this Takbiratul Ihram be said? You wait till the Imam This is if you're in Jamaat, you wait till the Imam has finished saying the takbir. Yeah, we'll come to the intention later, but the intention and the takbir go hand in hand here at the opening of the prayer when you begin. The second obligation is to stand for the takbiratul ihram. Someone, who comes and joins the Jamaat late, this is not an obligation upon them. They say the takbir and go into whatever position they find the Jamaat. Inshallah, we'll talk about this when we get there. The third obligation is that of the intention. So there must be a connection of the intention with the opening takbir. If they, delay the intention till after the takbir, it's not permitted because your prayer has already begun. Hold on. Bilal's got a question. Being able to stand to this last sitting. His prayer would be invalidated because it's an obligation to stand. And the one following him, not really, because if they're following him with full knowledge that he can stand and he sits and they're okay with it, then in that reason. Otherwise, where they genuinely believe that he can't stand, their prayer would be valid. Allah knows best. Okay. Again, the intention. As you say the intention, you make the intention. The intention is to make sure that you know what you are doing. You don't need to make the intention, this is 4 rakats of this prayer, whatever. If you just make the intention that, this is Dhuhr or Asr or Maghrib or Isha or Subh, it will suffice. Okay. The fourth obligation is to recite Fatiha. This is an obligation on the Imam and the individual who is praying on their own. It is not an obligation on those who are following him. Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi from the Malikis, his opinion is that it is an obligation in the silent prayers, and this is the hukm in the fard. As to the qiraat in the nafila, it's a sunnah. That's the well-known position. You don't, when you begin Fatiha, you don't say the ta'awud, you don't say the basmala in the fard. In the nafila, it's fine. Inshallah, when we come to the makruhat, we will cover this more in detail. Okay. So it's a obligation upon Fatiha is an obligation upon the Imam, the one praying on their own, and it's not a wajib on those who are praying behind the Imam. When we come to the recommendations, we'll cover that there, because it's a recommendation for those who pray behind the Imam in the silent rakats. The fifth obligation is to stand for the recitation of Surah Fatiha. And this is an obligation which is agreed upon for the Imam, the individual, because it is an obligation for the sake of Surah Fatiha. It's not, a fard on its own. It's because we have to recite Fatiha and we're under obligation to stand for it. As to those who are praying behind the Imam, they're under obligation to follow the Imam, and they're not allowed to go against the Imam. So it becomes a wajib upon them to stand because they're following the Imam. The sixth fard is the ruku. Now, the minimum of the ruku is just to place your hands on your knees, not to straighten your back. So the minimum is literally to place your hands on your knees. You don't, you bring your, elbows out, and you don't let you hang down towards the earth, and you don't raise it either. All of these are recommendations, to straighten the back, to bring your elbows out, and not to lower your head or to raise it, to keep it in its natural position. So the minimum of the fard of ruku is to put your hands on your knees. The seventh obligation is to rise from the ruku. Now, if you forget this or leave this obligation, you have to repeat it. That's the mashhur position of the school. The eighth obligation is the sajda, the sajdas. Now, you need to associate, in your sajda, submission, humility, and being present, so that you realize that you are standing in the very presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Malik said that the sajda is the forehead and the nose. So the obligation of the sajda is just the forehead and the nose. If someone was to just touch the ground with their nose, they would always have to repeat the sajda. As to, the hands, the knees, the feet touching, those are recommendations. Inshallah, we'll talk about them when we cover the recommendations. It is recommended that, the sajda is on the earth. So your face, your hands, they're all touching. in the time, Sanawla, the times that we're living in, it would be permitted just because of this. Once this problem is removed, then it wouldn't. Otherwise, there shouldn't be any barrier between, your nose, your forehead, touching the ground. So even if you have like a turban or a hat that becomes a barrier between, your sajda, that should be pulled up so, your forehead and your nose touches. The masks, just out of necessity, would be. Otherwise, once things are back to normal, but most people in the UK, I've noticed, they don't. In mosques and in crowded places, you find that the obligation has been lifted in the UK.
Yeah, and also with the restrictions, like coming down, then going back up, and then some mosque with
Again, if you find there's a need, then fine, just for that period. Once the restrictions are removed, then go back. But just when you are in the mosque, I know certain people, they will just pull their mask down so the nose can touch the ground.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if you just pull it down for your sajda and then pull it up again, that way any doubt is removed. However, if it is cold or hot or whatever, you can pray on a prayer mat. Otherwise, the recommendation is that the prayer should be on the ground, pure, clean earth. But it's very difficult. All the mosques are carpeted, so there's not much we can do. But about the mosques, life is for living. So if you find there's a need, then wear it. But once the danger is gone, then you need to go back to normal. The ninth obligation is to rise from the sajda. And this, when you rise from the sajda, your hands must be lifted from the ground as well. You'll find that people will leave their hands and just rise up from sajda. No, your hands need to come up again. The 10th one, the 10th obligation is the salam to end the prayer. Just as there is only one takbir, opening takbir, there is only one salam to end the prayer, and it's an obligation. And the word is assalamu alaykum. Yeah, the definite, not salamun alaykum, no, assalamu alaykum. And just the wording has to be pronounced properly and clearly, like the takbir itself. And this is, the salam that you will end your prayer with. If there's, someone on your right or left, to them you can say alaykum assalam. It's up to you. But the usual is that you will keep the order of the salam, because everyone's used to assalamu alaikum. You don't want to confuse people. But again, should they make the intention to end the prayer or not? Because when we begin the prayer, we make the intention. Should we make the intention to end the prayer. There are two scholarly opinions. One, yes, the other, no. It's your choice. From personal practice, it's good to get into the habit of, when you're ending a conversation, you say, I've got to go, and you say assalamu alaikum. Okay. The 11th obligation is to sit for the period in the final sitting to say the assalamu alaikum. So the amount of time it takes you to sit to say the assalamu alaikum, that is, an obligation. As for the tashahhud and, the two the two tashahhuds, and in the final tashahhud, the durood and the salawat and the dua, those are recommendations. The Malikis usually sit on their left hip, with them putting, the left leg foot between, the right arched foot. Inshallah, we'll cover it when we get to the recommendations. Okay, we've come to an end. Okay, yes. To the obligations, where we'll pick up next week from, the 12th obligation. Yes, Bilal has a question. The word itself is not a problem. For instance, if you think that you've mispronounced it and you correct the pronunciation, that is fine. And there is no such tassawwuf for it. Inshallah. We'll come to the end of our time today, inshallah, next week. I'll see you then, inshallah. Assalamu subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam.